I stared at the eviction notice in my trembling hands, the paper crumpling at the edges from how tightly I gripped it. My heart thudded like a warning drum, my stomach sick with dread. I'd known this was coming. The rent was weeks overdue, and every dollar I once had was now a memory. I'd sold my mother's old necklace, pawned my laptop, maxed out every credit card, and borrowed from friends I hadn't spoken to in years. None of it had been enough. The apartment was small, barely livable, but it was mine, and now it was slipping through my fingers. That evening, as the last light faded from the dusty blinds, a knock came at the door, not the frantic pounding of a bill collector or the gentle tap of a friend. This was something in between. I knew before I opened it who it would be. Dorian Blackwood. My landlord. He wasn't what you'd expect, not some greasy, balding man shouting threats. Dorian was different, late 40s, tall, dressed like he stepped out of a GQ editorial, polished, sharp. He always moved like he owned the room because, technically, he did. He didn't smile when I opened the door. He didn't have to. "You know why I'm here," he said calmly, one hand braced against the frame. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had gone dry. "I just need a little more time," I whispered. "Time?" he repeated, as if it were a joke. "Time isn't something you have, oh." There was something in his eyes, something cold, measured, but beneath it, I felt something else, something that made my skin crawl. "I could offer you an alternative," he said, stepping inside without asking. "An alternative," I echoed, backing up. Dorian shut the door behind him gently. No drama, just finality. "I think you know what I mean." My cheeks flushed. My heart pounded in my chest so loudly I was afraid he could hear it. He couldn't be serious, could he? "I'm not that kind of person," I managed. He didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He just placed a card on my kitchen counter, a sleek, matte black thing with his name and nothing else. One night, no attachments, no expectations, walk away debt-free. Then he turned, walked to the door, and left without another word. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at that card like it might catch fire. Every part of me wanted to scream, to tear it up and throw it in his face, but another part, the quieter, more desperate part, whispered, "What if?" That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, my mind spiraling in every direction. I didn't want this. I didn't want him, but I didn't want to be homeless either. I'd spent the last 2 months surviving off crackers and shame. I was running out of choices. I spent the next morning pacing the apartment, its silence deafening. I checked my phone obsessively, even though no messages came. I couldn't tell if I was hoping Dorian would text again or dreading it. I felt dirty just thinking about him, his voice, his suggestion, the way he looked at me like he already owned me. And yet, I couldn't ignore the other truth. I didn't have another option. I tried everything, called every number in my phone book, applied to every gig I could find, online dog walker, grocery delivery, even a posting for some guy looking for a companion with emotional flexibility. I laughed bitterly when I read that one, then almost applied anyway. I even messaged my ex. Simon. Stupid. I know. He had once said if I was ever in real trouble, he'd be there. I guess betrayal has a way of erasing promises like that. He read the message, then ignored it. Desperation warps you. It makes you entertain ideas that once repulsed you. One of my friends, an acquaintance, really once joked about sugar daddy websites. At the time, I laughed, called it pathetic, but later that night, I found myself scrolling through those exact profiles. Old men with plastic smiles offering apartments. Tuition. Luxury just for company. I hated that it didn't shock me anymore. I hated that I understood why women said yes. Was what Dorian offered really that different? I told myself it was. I told myself there was still a line I wouldn't cross. Then came the second knock. It was louder this time, sharper. I opened the door slowly, and there he was again, Dorian. But this time, he wasn't alone. Two men stood beside him, tall, well-dressed. They looked like they belonged in a high-end law firm or maybe a crime thriller. Both wore that same unreadable expression, cool, unshaken, but there was something dangerous beneath the surface. "I can tell you've been thinking," Dorian said, like we were discussing restaurant reservations. "Let me simplify this for you. Settle your debt. Walk away with a little extra for your troubles. Just say the word, I should have slammed the door. I should have screamed. Instead, I stood there, frozen, my hand clenched around the doorknob, my mouth too dry to speak. My thoughts swirled with shame and defiance and fear and something else I didn't want to name. "Think it over," he added. "This offer won't last." They turned and left, just like that. I stood there long after the door had closed, the room cold even though the heater was running. I wanted to cry. I wanted to be angry. But more than anything, I wanted to stop feeling powerless. That night, I didn't sleep again. My mind raced in circles, each lap bringing me back to the same brutal truth: I was out of time. When I called him the next morning, he picked up immediately. No hello, just "I knew you'd call." I hated how calm he sounded. I hated that part of me felt relief. We agreed to meet that evening at a hotel downtown. Nothing seedy. Of course, Dorian would never do anything in bad taste. Everything about him was presentation. I put on the only nice dress I owned, tried to do something with my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. The room was immaculate, expensive, a bottle of wine already open. Dorian poured a glass and handed it to me. "To new beginnings," he said with that infuriating smile. I drank without toasting. I told myself, just get through it. It's one night, rent covered, a little extra. You'll walk away. But when his hand touched mine, and I felt that shiver of unease crawl down my back, I knew nothing would be the same after this. The hours that followed passed in a blur I wish I could forget. The wine numbed me just enough to go through the motions, but not enough to erase the sounds, the smells, or the weight of what I was doing. I kept telling myself it was a transaction, just like buying time, a temporary solution, but there's no receipt for what I gave up that night. No way to return to who I was before the door closed behind me. By the time I opened my eyes the next morning, the room was quiet, too quiet. The men were gone, and all that remained was a heavy envelope left on the nightstand. I didn't want to touch it. I stared at it like it was poison, pulsing with the truth of what I'd become. Eventually, I picked it up. My fingers shook as I opened the flap. It was thick, more than enough for the rent, maybe 3 months' worth, maybe more. And still, as I counted it, a wave of nausea washed over me. The money meant nothing. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I stood in the shower for what felt like an hour, scrubbing every inch of my skin like I could wash away the memory, but the feeling clung to me. Not dirt shame, shame that crawled inside me and refused to leave. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. I flinched. It was a message from Dorian. "I trust you enjoyed yourself. Let me know if you'd like to do it again." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the money out the window. I wanted to tell him what kind of man he really was, but instead, I just stared at the screen, unable to reply, because part of me knew he didn't care. To him, I wasn't a person. I was a solution, a convenience, a plaything. And just when I thought I'd reached my lowest point, another message came. This one from someone I hadn't heard from in months. Simon, my ex, been thinking about you. The audacity, the sheer, twisted timing of it made me laugh out loud. What was it about me that drew these kinds of men? Was I just a magnet for liars, manipulators, men who only wanted me when they sensed I had nothing left to give? I didn't answer. I couldn't. But silence didn't mean escape. Dorian reached out again. This time, it wasn't just him. One of the other men his friend wanted to see me. They were offering even more money, promising it would be easy, just one more evening, no expectations. I told myself I would say no. I told myself once was enough, that I wasn't like those women who got pulled in deeper and deeper. But Dorian said something that made my blood run cold. My wife is asking questions. Be careful. Wife. The word hit me like a brick. I hadn't thought about her, hadn't considered what it meant, what it could mean. I was only thinking about myself, my survival, my desperation. Now, it was more than just shame. It was fear. Because women like her don't just ask questions. They find answers. And when they do, there's always a price. I tried to put it behind me. I told myself I was done, that I'd survived the worst of it, and now I could move on. But the messages kept coming. Dorian, his friend, then another name I didn't recognize, claiming to be a business associate. Each message was dressed in politeness, but the meaning underneath was as clear as ever. Come back. There's more money. Just say yes. It wasn't just the persistence, it was the way they assumed I'd say yes, like I was already bought and paid for, like dignity was something you could subtract from a check. And then, the knock came. Not rushed, not hesitant, just deliberate. I looked through the peephole. A woman. Elegant, composed. She had the kind of presence that made you straighten your back without realizing. Her hair was pulled into a tight chignon, makeup flawless, outfit crisp and expensive. I hesitated, then opened the door. She stepped inside without asking. "You're not the first," she said, her voice like silk laced with ice, "and you won't be the last." I stood frozen. She moved with confidence. Not a hint of uncertainty in her gaze. She knew exactly who I was, and more terrifyingly, she knew exactly what had happened. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope, heavier than the one Dorian had left. She placed it on my kitchen counter without ceremony. "Take it and disappear, or don't, and watch what happens when I ruin him." I stared at the envelope. My first instinct should have been gratitude, relief, but instead, I found myself asking, why pay me, if you plan to destroy him anyway? Her smile was slight, but it didn't reach her eyes. Because I like options, and I enjoy watching men squirm. That's the real currency. Isn't it, control? Something shifted inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear or shame. I felt clarity. I slid the envelope back toward her. "Do it," I said. Her smile deepened. It wasn't joy. It was something colder, like satisfaction forged in fire. And in that moment, I realized she'd already started. It didn't take long. A week later, the world around Dorian Blackwood began to crumble publicly, messily. And without mercy, the scandal hit like a tidal wave. Allegations, leaked messages, photos, names of other women. He tried to deny it, of course, tried to spin the story as a misunderstanding, an act of revenge by a bitter ex. But the truth didn't just surface. It exploded. His clients dropped him. His business partners backed away like he was contagious. The polished image he had so carefully curated cracked open for everyone to see. More women came forward, brave voices that had been silent for too long. Some told stories like mine, others, far worse. He had made a game of it, a pattern, a strategy, and now it had turned into his downfall. I watched it all unfold from a distance. I didn't contact him. I didn't answer the calls. He tried at first with subtlety, then with desperation, but I had already disappeared, moved into a new apartment in another part of the city under a different lease. Cash paid up front. He wouldn't find me. And even if he did, I wasn't the same woman anymore. I should have felt free, like I'd won something, like justice had finally tipped in my favor. But instead, I felt empty. Because justice doesn't undo what's been done. It doesn't return your dignity or erase your decisions. It just ends the story on paper. The rest stays with you. I tried to build something normal again. I got a part-time job at a bookstore. Something quiet. Something safe. I started cooking my own meals again. I lit candles. I opened the windows. I tried to reclaim pieces of myself that I had packed away. And for a while, it worked. Until the message came. A new number. A new name. A different offer, but the same shape. The same weight. It came wrapped in sweet words and vague promises. Nothing explicit. Nothing incriminating. But I knew. I stared at my phone for a long time. I didn't open the message. I didn't delete it either. My finger hovered over the screen. The air thick with the sound of old ghosts whispering. I knew exactly where that path led. And still, a small part of me, the part that had once said, just one night, whispered, "You know how to survive now." But I wasn't sure if surviving meant staying alive or staying broken. I didn't open the message that night. I left my phone face down on the table, turned out the lights, and lay on the couch, staring into the dark. The silence didn't comfort me. It pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't push off. In that silence, I finally asked myself a question I'd been avoiding. What am I afraid of losing? If I say no? For weeks, fear had guided every step I took. Fear of losing my home, fear of hunger, fear of judgment, fear of being nothing. But now, the bigger fear, the one I hadn't admitted, was this fear that the worst thing that happened to me might be the only thing that gave me power. When Dorian offered me that first deal, I had felt powerless, trapped, but afterward, in the quiet that followed, with that envelope of cash in my hands, I had felt something else, control, not freedom, but the illusion of it, like I'd finally been given a choice in a world that had taken all my choices away. That illusion is dangerous. It starts to feel like strength. It's not. It's a cage with gold-plated bars. I thought about the woman who had come to my door. Her grace, her vengeance. She wore her pain like a tailored coat, tight and pristine. She had power, but it hadn't freed her. She wasn't fighting for justice. She was feeding a wound that never closed. And I saw the path. It wasn't paved in shame or filth. It was paved in money, silence, and numbness, step by step. So smooth you almost didn't notice you were disappearing. I didn't want that. I didn't want to vanish into convenience. I didn't want my story to end with another message, another envelope. Another hotel room where I'd leave pieces of myself behind. I wanted to be whole again. So I deleted the message. And then the one before that. And the one before that. I turned off my phone. I walked to the window. I opened it. The city was alive, as broken and beautiful as ever. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I still had rent to pay, bills to manage, pain to carry. But that night, for the first time in a long time, I chose me. And that choice was a beginning.